What was expected to be a fall classic turned into Dodgers domination. And that's going to kind of kick off our Hitting with Holly podcast today. We're also going to get into the state of the Marlins. Holly, they had their two finalists, and neither one wanted to be a finalist here. So we'll dive more into the Marlins situation a little later on. But top of the show. We're gonna kind of just drive home, and in this episode, last couple of weeks, and so we've been breaking down high school player swings and such. We will get back to doing that. We're appreciating the feedback. A lot of response from our audience likes that, but with the World Series, with the free agency, managerial search, we're going to kind of drive home the big leagues in this particular episode of Hitting with Holly with Todd Hollandsworth. But before we bring in Holly, reminder: please like, subscribe to the channel. We're growing it. Just have a lot of really good content up on the Man on Second Sports YouTube channel. But with that, Holly, we were expecting, we both picked Dodgers in 6, and it looked like there was going to, for a while, it could be Dodgers in 4. And, just kind of your thoughts. It kind of played out the finish the way we expected, but how it finished with how sloppy the Yankees were and how the Dodgers just pounced on them. Obviously deserving champions. Your thoughts, Todd Hollandsworth?
Right. No. Hey, good morning, Joe. And, right off the top, I told this to a lot of people. Last night was Halloween. So, we had a lot of people coming through, a lot of kids, a lot of people, baseball talk always seems to, kind of wrap up the season. And, listen, my opinion and my thought isn't unique. I think that a lot of people, when you hear what I say, it kind of resonates with fans. And, Joe, you tell me if I'm off or if you think something different, please, you're jumping in any time. And, the unfortunate part of this World Series wasn't celebrating the Los Angeles Dodgers and what many people thought was actually going to happen in the World Series. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but a lot of times it's how you lose. And I think that what's kind of happened, even in the last 48 hours or so since the World Series basically ended, was that there's been a lot more about how the Yankees have lost than how the Dodgers have won. And that's kind of what it gets down to, right? So you get to the World Series and, you have this mindset that clearly you've got the two teams playing the best baseball at the end of the year because they found themselves in the World Series. How did that stop on a dime for the Yankees? How did that just fall apart the way that it looked like? Just the sense of, there was some obvious desperation in the last ball game, but just the way that the whole thing played itself out, I think that there's just been a lot of people who really were complaining about the Yankees' inability to just play team baseball. That's the simple answer. Just the idea of do what you're supposed to do, make the plays you're supposed to play, make, and let's see where this thing ultimately ends up. Maybe we can find our way back. They had one game, obviously, what was it, game 4, where it all came together. The offense kind of showed up. Yeah, it got a little bit out of hand late for the Yankees, and the offense kind of woke up. But, Joe, you and I both know this. Baseball is this incredible game of momentum. And, you've been in clubhouses, you've been in locker rooms your whole life. You've seen it. You've seen it from the perspective of somebody who's not a player, in the sense that you can read that body language. You can kind of read the room and you can sense momentum. And for whatever reason, the Yankees, all the momentum that they conjured up, all the momentum that we watched the Dodgers create for themselves through good at bats, quality at bats, Freddie Freeman moments, Mookie Betts getting hot, there's a lot. Tommy Edman, just shocking so many people. Where did he come from? And you see how the ball starts to roll in their favor. And then they were able to extend it out for, at least a few games before maybe there was a loss somewhere along the way to them winning the World Series. But with that being said, you saw the Yankees create it in game 4. The offense got rolling. There were some home runs. There were good quality at bats. Things were moving in the right direction. And boy, oh boy, did it just stop on a dime, just a few innings into game 5. And you just don't typically see that with a World Series team. And I think that's what shocked a lot of people.
I think it was almost a game 5, and how after the 4-run lead by the Yankees, obviously they got the fast start with Judge and Jazz homering, and then you saw this giddiness. There's one thing to be excited to be up, but it was almost in the eyes of the Yankees and their followers and the media, because you see on the Twitter things, they're going back to LA. It's a formality. You got Garrett Cole on the mound, and they did something. I thought they lost focus. It seemed like they thought the game was over by the fourth or so inning, and I really, Tom Verducci interviewing Aaron Boone about and asking a question about Aaron Judge's home run and what that could mean for the rest of the series. And while they're talking, they're doing a split screen and Stanton homers. I'm like, it seemed like that's when the Fox people tell Verducci to get in Boone's ear. And I honestly thought they did those interviews between the innings, not literally during. It almost seemed like, and it became a TV show after 4-0. So then Stanton homers, and now it's 5-0, and they're popping the champagne, it seems like, doing all but. And then we get to the bottom of the fifth inning. And as for all the great Yankee highlights, and you've seen them, I mean, you came up with the Dodgers, you on the 03 Marlins playing against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never, in all the lore of Yankee history, that a meltdown like that, and was just so shocking. That is just and the Dodgers are seizing it like, wow, like, hey, you're going to do this for us? We don't need 6 outs. 4 outs could sometimes be enough. Cole just visibly getting, not covering first base. I want your thoughts on that in a minute. But I almost thought like the Yankees had already, we won. We're going back. We're getting on the bird, right? That's what Booney called it, the bird. We're going to get on a bird. We're getting on the bird tonight. That type of mentality. It was almost like the intersecting of the entertainment aspect of the sport with and to me, even as a media or a fan, and my team is up 10-0. I'm still in a game like that. I'm still thinking, how do we win this game? Like, no man, I'm always like, oh man, we're up by 4 or 5 with now we got to get 12, 15 outs to go to win this thing. As a fan and media person, I don't take any lead for granted.
Right.
So I don't understand how the Yankees somehow lost so much focus and just boom. And the Dodgers didn't need any help to win this thing. And if you gave them that much help, they were going to embarrass you on your home field. Yeah. And we will get to what they did right. But right now we're highlighting what the Yankees didn't do right.
Well, and I think that's really where a lot of the conversation has gone. And, this isn't taking anything away from my former team, the Los Angeles Dodgers. And congratulations to all of them. They earned it. Freddie Freeman, boy, did you make a statement. Boy, did you surprise everybody. I just thinking that, on Freddie, what a great run. Good, great guy, great story. Is such a great spokesman for the sport, for the industry. To see him have his moment, especially with the way the postseason had gone. We'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But for me, just to wrap up on the Yankees, when I was drafted in 1991, so we're going back in the time machine here, way back, 30 plus years, right? There were a few organizations that you wanted to be drafted by. And if you did, you almost considered it an honor. And I was drafted by one of them in the Los Angeles Dodgers, but another one was the New York Yankees. I mean, everybody knows the story and the backstory and the history. Even if you're, just a modest fan of the sport, you know that the Yankees are looked at differently, treated differently, thought of differently than really just about every other team in baseball. And there's certainly a level of expectation, right? I mean, we were just talking, last week, Joe, how interesting it is, right? That we've got these two great powerhouse teams that are in so many ways the spokesman for our sport and their managers being on hot seats. Just because, they expect World Series championships. It's not about, hey, listen, let's hope we make the postseason this year and pick up a couple of wins. The expectations are way higher for Dave Roberts and for Aaron Boone than they are for anybody else. It comes with the territory. To see the Yankees perform the way that they did, it's almost, I can't even really think of the word to describe it. It's so shocking to my system, because of even that built-in understanding and expectation that I've lived with all of my life in understanding the Yankees. Like, when I was in spring training in Florida with the Dodgers and we would go play the Yankees, it was a big deal. Well, you understand what I'm saying? Like, spring training in Florida, there's teams all over the state, so there's travel involved. I'll give you a quick example. And, when I was coming up, most guys didn't want to go 45 minutes down the road to go play the Orioles. Most of your big leaguers, they wanted to play at home. They didn't want to get on buses. They didn't want to be traveling. They didn't want to spend the whole day, doing a bus ride, doing all this other stuff, coming out of the game early and waiting around at the visiting ballpark, waiting to get back home. But when it came to the Yankees, and, we would always play them at least once or twice, and we'd make the trip up to Tampa. I mean, it was like everybody wanted to go, and, because it's the Yankees. And it was like, we want to do this. It's a big deal. It's a different stage. It's New York. And to see them play like this, like I said, I think of a lot of words that I won't use, but it's shocking. You know what I mean? It was really just shocking to see a team miss on the basics of the game, to miss on the things that they pride themselves, right? Just the pride of the Yankees, that they do better than everybody else. Listen, you can have guys who hit home runs. You can have guys who, you can have your Giancarlo Stanton, your Aaron Judge. You can counter that with the Shohei Ohtani. I mean, really, neither superstar was a factor in the World Series, and it became about the other players. And when you get to these types of games and with this type of stage, you just don't want to see a team beat itself. I've always believed it's one thing if you go into a game and you say, I'm ready, here we go. You got me, you beat me, you were better than me today. But I was ready. I was ready to go. I didn't miss anything. I dotted the I's, I crossed the T's, I prepped right. I had good thoughts, about what I want to do with my at-bats, whatever. But I was ready and you beat me. That's honestly what, in a lot of ways, our 03 team played with. That was our superpower. Our Marlins team in 03 was our superpower, was that we knew we were walking in that. We were walking in that faith and that trust that we had in each other, that we were going to put our best effort out on the field every night. But if you beat us, you beat us. That's why we were fearless in Chicago. I mean, everybody's like, how did you guys come back in Chicago? Really, that was it, because we weren't rattled by anything. The Yankees were rattled. The Yankees were imploding in that fifth inning. We saw it in front of our own eyes. I mean, it wasn't just one thing that went wrong. Good teams, when one thing goes wrong, cover for the one thing that goes wrong and make up for it. And in fact, when I saw Judge drop the fly ball and they were teetering on just getting out of it, like I thought there's these two errors. And if I'm remembering this correctly, Cole strikes out a couple of guys. Like, I'm thinking he's getting out of this. And this is going to be one of those moments where a teammate picks up a teammate, and it's like it can create a tremendous amount of momentum back in your dugout, even with a lead, because you knew that you set yourself up for failure. You're asking your starter to get 5 outs in this inning, and he's got the bases loaded and everything's like, crumbling, but he's going to be the one to boom. And then he ends up being the one not to cover first base. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, see, that's like so un-Yankee-like and shocking to most of our systems. Anybody who's been around our sport long enough knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Take us through, because there is a kind of a bigger picture thing about the state of the sport I'm going to get to after your answer. But, it's just funny. You see on Twitter the amount of people that just don't know baseball that were like, Rizzo should have gone to the base, that when they try to show this image of the aerial view of Cole, like closer to where Mookie was, because he kind of moved. Take us through how Garrett Cole, the second that ball's hit, should have been angled to go to first, and that it wasn't Anthony Rizzo's fault.
No. Listen. So, here's the thing. Garrett did everything right to start, but clearly his thoughts took over his body. When you watch him come off the mound, the minute that ball was hit, I don't care what angle you're looking at, he knew exactly what he was supposed to do, and he stopped doing it for whatever reason. I don't know. I mean, only he knows. But the point of it is this, and I played some first base, so I feel as though I'm qualified at the highest level. I didn't play a lot of first base, but I played enough to know how this works. It's called pitcher's fielding practice. Mm-hmm. You get over there on every ball. Every ball. You may not get every ball. You may not get it. If you're busting it to the bag and you're 3 steps ahead of the base runner who's coming down the line, and I can get to the bag, I'm gonna call you off as a first baseman, and I'm gonna go take it myself. But you are my safety net. What happens if I bobble the ball? What happens if on my way to the bag I start bobbling the ball? What happens if I drop the ball? What happens if I trip over my shoelace? There's all these things that can happen. It's the idea that you're protecting each other. If the out doesn't come this way, it comes another way, but you're all in position to get the out, and the out's the guarantee. That's what has to happen. And as simple as that play was, when the ball was hit over there, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this is just a classic snowballing of mental thoughts in all of their minds. It was from Judge peeking to the throw to third that came up short to, you know what I'm saying? It's like all of these things, you can just see it. This has nothing to do with ability. It has everything to do with what's going on between all of their ears. And you can see this start to snowball. And on the flip side of it, you watch the Dodgers capitalize on it. The Dodgers didn't capitalize on it by going up to the plate looking for the big swing. They went up to the plate looking for sacrifice flies, put the ball in play, get the runs across.
Just get a run in, just get something, right?
Right.
Something
You got a glimpse.
Yeah.
100%. You got a glimpse of the mental side of our sport and how this works. And when you're covering it, you make the job easier for the Dodgers. The Dodgers just willfully accepted it. They didn't step in there. Like I said, I was as impressed with the Dodgers' approach to that inning, to all the extra outs that they were getting. They were just putting together quality at bats, jumping on some first pitches. I mean, Garrett Cole had dominated them to that point. And so they went up there like, okay, we need a big swing from somebody. Somebody hit us a grand slam. We got to have that moment to get all those runs back with one swing of the bat. No, they were just like, put the ball in play, drive the ball to the gap, see where, and it got them where they needed to be. And who didn't, even after they tied up the ball game, and even after the Yankees took back the lead, didn't think that the Dodgers were going to make another run at them. We were watching.
Oh, you knew that. Yeah. You were like, how are the Yankees going to somehow, if the Yankees didn't add on, how is that Yankee bullpen going to just pick up? What was it? Ended up being 3 in the third or so innings, and they couldn't. They couldn't.
But doesn't that explain
the 8th inning? They gave up the hit. Next thing you know, it was a mess.
So when you ask fans, and so like this is where it's like, okay, I know it because I've seen it and I've lived it, and I've been in the clubhouse, I've been in the dugout. I mean, I know what's going on, and you see it all happening. But even when fans who are just fans of the sport, maybe never played a day in their lives, start to pick up on that, you start to understand it, and you start to see it. We were all thinking the same thing. My wife said the same thing to me. She's like, the Yankees are in trouble. The Yankees were clinging to a 1-run lead, but you could tell that they were in trouble. The body language wasn't right. The mindset wasn't right. And of course, what happened.
Yeah. Now maybe they were going to lose game 6 anyway or whatever, but it's like, because it's obviously to come back from 4, 3 games down to winning is not obviously easy, but you just sense that. I find it kind of ironic and perfectly fitting, especially as we're in the age of the sport where it is a showcase, it is a focus, it is a magnification of analytics in terms of how hard you hit the ball, what's your spin rate, what's your pitch velocity, what's your exit, what's your launch angle, what's your weighted runs created plus, what's your OBP, what's your xWOBA. It's all that. And I see it, even covering fall ball, and I don't want to sound very critical of high school kids in the fall because a lot of it is you're just kind of getting reps in. But you've been out, seeing your school at Westminster Academy, and I'm seeing it in pretty much everyone. Base running from high school kids, guys not knowing when to go to third, guys on third on a single in the outfield are scared to even score. Guys are like the base running has been bad. And again, I'm not singling out any of it because I love all these kids. I cover them, but you just see so much fundamentals. But, and the fall should be to work on fundamentals. But when you see at the big league level a lack of fundamentals, well, is it shocking that, when you take it down to the college or now to the high school and even the kids feeding into the high school, that they aren't as prioritized, that they are focused more on all the little having fun things and the, doing all those little extracurricular things that are considered cool or make the game not boring. But, simply knowing to cover a base cost for a $300 million pitcher is going to be haunted by that play, and that's going to be a replay. And that, I mean, just say it's the Dodgers you did it against. I mean, look at the play that the Bartman play has done. And for the Marlins, they get no national publicity, is known as this is going to be known for a long time. This is going to be one of those moments. And the Yankees are on the receiving end of it, not the celebratory end of it.
Well, and it's interesting because, as good as Garrett Cole is, listen, I have all the respect in the world for him. He's one of the best right-handers in the game. This young man has done just incredible things. He's earned what he's earned for a reason. And this guy is, as the kids call him, this guy's a dog. I mean, this guy, he wants the ball, and he's out there in a way that we don't see in many in our sport any longer. But the point that I'm going to make is this. It's like we get to the end of the journey, and it's fair to look at the game itself. But I saw way too much focus, is Garrett Cole going to come back? Of course, his contract status, right? He's got the ability to opt out. There was a lot of this chatter. And of course, you don't want to take away from how dominant he was, pitching. Because, you look at his stat line, of course, he works into the seventh inning, doesn't give up any earned runs, everybody, right? He doesn't give up any earned runs. And certainly there's some credit there. But I guess really what I'm getting at is, to your point, like that moment in the game, it's like, what are we focusing on? And the reality is in so many ways, we move past the outcome of the game, which the point of the game is to win the game. And we'll get hung up. It's like the player. Let's put it to you this way. It's like the player. And I had plenty of these teammates, and I certainly was guilty of this a time or two in my life. And so I'm not saying it's easy to do, but you start to understand it the older you get in the game. You go 2 for 4 that day, and you hit a home run and a double, and you're like, man, I really swung the bat well, but you lost 4-2. You're feeling good for yourself because you had a good game and you were swinging the bat well, but you lost the game. Now, I'm not saying every time you walk off the baseball field, you got to be with your head down, feeling like the weight of the world's on your shoulders. But at the same time, it's understanding that dynamic and how it works. What's the ultimate goal? And the ultimate goal for the Yankees was to win a game they should have won. Was that they had a lead that they should have maintained. That should have been us getting ready. You and I sitting here this morning talking about Game 6, which should be happening tonight. And what our focus has ultimately become, we'll get on that for a little bit, but then you just kind of get back to, listen, he threw the ball really, really well, so it wasn't all Garrett Cole's fault. See what I'm saying? It's like I would have a hard time living with that. The way that we lost that game, that would burn me. And if I had a hand in that, if I dropped the fly ball, I would that would be over me for a long time.
Yeah, and it is with Judge, and that's a shame because right. The physical error is going to happen, and for a superstar, and maybe that should be the lesson to the younger, because we do have a kind of more grassroots following here on the channel. Sure. We're not just 100% MLB type channel. So when a Garrett Cole and an Aaron Judge, the best of the best, have something as simple as, catching a ball, doing something to cover your bag and do what you take, like Holly's saying, to do what it takes to win the game. Well, catching a ball and touching a base goes into winning the game. So I hope that it heightens awareness, even if it's 1 or 2 players listening to this, that don't take anything for granted on the field. Even if you're, like you say, dominant, because what Holly's saying, I'm thinking, as soon as you said about the 2 for 4 thing and feeling good about yourself, or that Cole did his part overall, pitching in the 7th, got enough outs, I'm thinking about a football quarterback. Well, I threw 3 touchdowns against another guy who threw 3 touchdowns, and now I'm on the goal line with a chance to win the game, and I get picked in the end zone because I just misread. I kind of just flubbed this play. Right. And I lose this heartbreaker. Then I come back and talk to the press and say, hey, man, I threw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Right. And just kind of say everything you did except for. But this gets to kind of the root of it, Holly, and why baseball players, the elite, make so much money. They do because they're the dudes, right? Those are the ones that you're looking for, the optimal impact players. I'm sure, Stanton had a chance to drive in a run in like the 8th inning. Or even, in his last at bat, as good of a series as he had, he didn't come through. And I'm sure knowing Giancarlo, he's going to be thinking more about, having a guy in second with a chance to drive in another run. Now, granted, it was his sack fly, and he did hit a homer, so he put him up 5-4 or 6-5. And but knowing G, he's going to be like that last at bat when they really needed it. I didn't do it. I didn't get the job done there.
Right. It is. These are the things that make you better, and I guess really where this goes, because when you tell stories in the game of baseball, and of course you get to the last game of the World Series, and this is going to stick for a while. But with that being said, the object of the sport itself is that when you do have one of those moments, that you learn from it, that it motivates you, and that it never happens again. And I think that's where, you really want this to go. And there's just been so many reminders, I think, throughout our sport this year, throughout Major League Baseball. There's been so much chatter, quality at bats, understanding, hitting situations, guys doing the job, just the simple jobs, moving a guy along and not striking out in spots where, you can't strike out, and just finding ways to put the ball in play. All of those things are starting to come back into our game, which was really how the game was meant to be played from the beginning in the first place. But with that being said, you've got to make those adjustments. And so you've got to see those adjustments, and we need to see those next year. And I think that, I would much rather paint a broader stroke over that, because I saw it in a lot of levels. I think the Yankees were just kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time for everybody to see what they saw a lot of this year throughout Major League Baseball. Of course, there was a lot of great baseball, a lot of great stories. And again, I don't want to get past that, but of course, this is what we're, kind of talking about this morning, is that, the idea is that, it can't happen again. There was one time, I give everybody an example. There was one time, and I'll tell you how I handled it. I was in Chicago in Wrigley Field, early game. I was a Dodger at the time, very early in my career. I think I was in my second year. Bases were loaded. It was snowing. We were playing in the snow. It wasn't quite on the field yet, but it was snowing. I was freezing. We were all freezing. It was cold. It was very, very miserable. There was a play in the game where I'd kind of computed in my mind a double play that should have been turned, but the double play didn't get turned. We only got one out. So now I was, I had convinced myself, I had tricked my brain into believing that there were two outs. And of course, I get a deep fly ball. And I go back and catch the ball. I dropped my head and started running in. And, I think Mark Grace was at third. He goes back, he tags, he comes in and scores. Sammy was at second base and saw exactly what I did, and doing exactly what he should have done, and exactly what we saw the Dodgers do throughout the series. I made a huge mistake. I didn't know how many outs there were. I dropped my head. I started running in. Sammy tags from second base and scores. Now, it was probably the lowest moment of my life, at least in terms on a Major League Baseball field. I was embarrassed. I was angry. I was, every emotion that you can think. And of course, I was a young kid. I mean, I couldn't have been much. I was probably 23, maybe 24 at the time when I did this. But it never, ever happened again. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that there was I played another 9 years or 10 years. There was not another game that I played in the outfield where I didn't know how many outs there were every second of what was going on. Like, that haunted me, and it stayed with me for that way. That's what you need to see. That's what we need to see moving forward is, okay, the mistake happened. It is what it is. We fell apart, whatever, but it can't happen again. You can't just sweep it under the rug and say, okay, it's, just whatever, it just happened, and just move on, because now you're setting yourself up to have another one of those moments. You have to make it one of those moments in the back of your mind that's, I screwed this up. I own it. And it can't happen again. Plain and simple.
No, that's great. And it gets down to accountability. It gets down to expectation and standard. And then we're going to segue over, because we're about halfway through the podcast now. And we're going to talk about the Marlins. Obviously, we're based down here in South Florida. Todd Hollandsworth obviously played for the Marlins, was on the broadcast team on TV with the Marlins. I covered them for many, many years, 2 decades basically plus. And we're seeing, we've hit on this, and it pains us because we want the Marlins to be relevant. We want them to be good. But, it gets down to things happening again, like Holly was just talking about. And the Marlins sadly have created a culture where, and they made it public that they had 2 finalists for a managerial job that never really should have been open, because they had a elite manager to begin with, but kind of botched up 2024 and let him, choose to exit and not want to be part of it. But then you hear it leaks out. They had two finalists, Holly. They interviewed at least four, maybe five or more. And I will say this, because I'm not doing a ton of work, researching Marlins. I'm doing a lot of other things, but I do hear things. But I had heard that this interview process, which isn't too shocking because of how they're operating, how, controlling the front office wants to be, how involved now Gabe Kapler is on the developmental side, Peter Bendix being 1,000,000% analytics, not even anything but, that the interviews from people that interviewed were considered a little awkward, a little odd, a little different, and not the best vibe for some of the candidates. So you get out now that the Marlins had two finalists, one Will Venable, who ends up, and as the irony is the two teams with managerial openings, the White Sox and Marlins, two of the worst teams, are literally in on the same guys. So you have Venable up for the Marlins job, White Sox job. He takes that, and then you had Craig Albernaz, bench coach for Cleveland Guardians, who had history, with Peter Bendix in Tampa, and I guess he had been either on the staff of Kapler in San Francisco, but they knew him. He was kind of a name that they seemed like was going to be their solution. Well, Jeff Passan reports yesterday on ESPN that Albernaz basically withdraws his name from consideration and will stay with Cleveland. Now we know that means he could be, if somebody else has an opening, he can jump there. But point being, your two finalists both said, in Miami here. And are we shocked? And this is what, for all the people down here who are all in on the analytics, and that's fine, you could like that approach. But when you have a culture that has a manager of the year leave after 2 years, and basically could have been dismissed at any time this year because he was always lamed up to begin with, after he wins manager of the year, you fire 72 or so people overall. And now you want a up-and-coming manager of the future type to buy into any type of commitment here. Until the organization shows a little, and Holly's talked about this, he'll probably jump in and say it better than me. How do you expect anyone to buy into what you're doing when you, as an organization, don't buy into what you're doing more than a day or a month or a year at a time?
It's going to take a while. That's the answer, and it always has been. I mean, these questions have been asked for a very, very long time in different ways. What do organizations do when they're not everybody's first selection, first choice? What do you do when the public perception is certainly not what the Marlins would want it to be right now? What you end up ultimately having to do is to take baby steps forward instead of big leaps forward, because you're not in a position to draw the game's greatest talent. Your finances don't allow you to do that. I always find that it's, for our audience, maybe easier to explain it in terms of things that are simpler. I can get into all the conversations and, this is our formula for success and how you have to convince somebody to buy into something. And, back in the day, there were there were places you wanted to play, and there's reasons why you want to play it. Let me give you an example. Since I was a Colorado Rocky, it was very easy for me to understand. When I got traded to the Colorado Rockies, I knew where I was going and I was very excited. Great place to hit. And I went there with the mentality that I'm going to take full advantage of it. And I wanted to help our organization, because when I got to the Colorado Rockies, we were at the time building, and, we were trying to, get competitive, and we were close. I mean, we were hovering around 500, but the idea was we wanted to take that next step forward. But you come in with the mindset of, I want to take full advantage of what I can take full advantage of. And the problem that the Marlins are having right now is really that's never been established. And so you're not everybody's favorite pick. And so now you're in a position where it's like, if you want to get players that are going to help, or even a manager that you feel like is going to help you advance quicker, you tend to have to overpay for it. Were the Marlins overpaying for anything? No.
They're actually,
right.
Of these 70 so people they fired, they're going to hire cheaper and fewer. So
Right.
you're just going to add to the work, like they depleted the scouting department. So the scouts that they retained are younger, cheaper, and going to be asked to do more.
Right. So you've now put yourself in a position where, I think that, Gabe Kapler certainly has had, success on the other side of his playing career. He had it in his playing career, but he's had some success as a manager, and now he's in a front office doing, a lot of the heavy lifting. I guess that's kind of where I would leave it. That's the answer that really is the answer to your question, is that Peter Bendix and Gabe Kapler are going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting. I mean, they're going to have a hard time divvying up the responsibility of reshaping their vision, which is what they're trying to do in a market that is a blank canvas right now. You don't have a direction. You're not like, this is who we are. We're defined by this. We're an offensive ball club. We're, maybe they're a pitching ball club, pitching and defense. But the idea is you have a dream and an idea of what you believe that the Marlins can be. Ownership believes in them. They've given them the opportunity to chase their dream down of what they think the Marlins should ultimately look like. But you're having a hard time getting others to buy into that dream. So it's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on you to make that realization happen, because at some point you're going to get called, with the expectation, why aren't we a 500 ball club by yet? Whether that's 2 years from now, three years from now, 4 years from now, whenever it shows itself, you never know when ownership's going to come knocking on the door and say,
yeah,
this is where I expect us to be at this moment in time. Why aren't we there yet? And it's going to put a lot more pressure on the individuals. Now, do I believe that they created some of that? I do. I absolutely do. To your point about firing the scouts and, the idea of downsizing and that we can control it differently and it's more cost effective, that it's going to make more sense. You still are going to have, as we called it as players, grinders, guys that were dirtbags, guys that were going to do whatever the manager asked them to do to win the ball game, sparing no concern over their own personal statistics of, whatever that you need a sacrifice bunt in the 8th inning and I've been sitting on the bench all day, I'm going to get it done. Call on me.
Yeah.
And those are the guys that you look to. They're in a lot of ways, they're actually the glue to teams. They're the guys that make it all make sense, because your star players and your organizations that run fluidly have star players and star positions. That's why they're the organizations that they are. And because you're not there yet, you're looking for glue guys, and you're having a hard time finding those guys that can bring you that. To your point about Skip. Skip was that guy. That is exactly who Skip was. That's who he was as a player. That's who he is as a manager. And if you think that the two don't go together, we're all kidding ourselves. Skip wasn't all of a sudden a different type of manager than he was a player. And this is a guy who understood what it took to bring a clubhouse together and find ways to win ball games. The thing that always amazed me about his first year here on the job was the run differential and the number of one-run ball games that the Marlins were winning. That's a lot of credit to your manager. He knows what he's doing. He knows where his strength is in his bullpen, and that's what he's managing towards. And despite the lack of offense, you put yourself in a position to earn a playoff spot. So now all of a sudden you're getting creative. Well, now you've pushed that guy to the curb, so to speak. I mean, listen, call it 50-50 or whatever you want. Skip's not here any longer.
Yeah.
But you're looking for somebody just like him. See what I'm saying? You had him. So that message gets out to everybody. You don't have to be in Miami to know what's going on in Miami. I mean, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but you know what's going on visually. And to your point, the way that you presented it, Joe, was spot on. Like, if you're a Marlins fan right now and you're feeling like, okay, how could how could individuals who want to be managers pull their name out of consideration? You know what I'm saying? These jobs are hard to come by, man. There's only 30 of them as a top dog, as the top lieutenant. You know what I'm saying? So,
well, that's what they're banking on. They're banking on desperation from a candidate and not realizing that Skip could either manage in 25. It doesn't seem likely, because it seems like teams that would have made that move already would have done it. Maybe Skip becomes a bench coach somewhere for a year. Maybe Skip joins an organization and it wouldn't be a bad move. And I know a lot of people have done this. Mark Wiley did it, where you become like a special advisor because Wiley was a great pitching coach. He was like a special advisor, made him a scout type of guy. Would go and sit in the press box, sit behind in the bowl behind home plate with the scouts, watch the game from a different vantage point. I wouldn't be shocked if
Manager
there's
for
a
the
team that
Padres did it.
that brings Skip in where we see Skip in press boxes, in the press dining, and be out there for a year and absorb all that goes on off the field in this sport and then carries that back to the dugout in 26. All this stuff at his disposal. He'd rather do that than when he gave all of his sweat and blood here and wasn't rewarded with anything in terms of a roster and no commitment to a roster and moving forward. So the Marlins have completely, it's the culture that they burn on themselves, like you say. And the funny thing is about Kapler, well, people might say, why doesn't Kapler just go manage him? Well, I think Kapler looks like he wants either the big chair to make the decisions himself, or is Kapler wanting to go and be part of a rebuild? Or you bring someone in. Like, I look at Kapler as someone, and I just kind of heard this through the grapevine. He may wait for another manager. Let's say they do bring in somebody and the team makes the incremental steps, and in 2 years they're ready to win. And that manager was more of a teacher, more of a pat you on the back type of guy or girl, because I still wouldn't be shocked if they hire a woman as manager. They're interviewing the one. So it's like maybe then Kapler jumps in saying, "Oh, kind of like Pat Riley wanting to, coach when they're ready to win, not coach the 80 loss the NBA or 60 loss NBA team."
Very possible. I mean, again, that's you and I have seats as spectators right now. I mean, that's it. I mean, our information, our knowledge, certainly we know people around the sport and we talk to people and we hear things, but we're not behind the closed doors. So we have to be certainly respectful of that. But, with that being said, perception does matter. And perception right now is not very good. And it certainly is not, coming across. I mean, you know that whoever they hire, it's going to be the idea of regrouping, rebuilding, all pulling in the same direction. You're going to hear the right. I mean, they come out of me naturally. I've heard them so many times. Yeah. They ooze out. Right. We're all pulling in the same direction. We're buying the same thing. We're mixing analytics and the grind of what we're looking for and the types of ball players that we want to raise and the types of ball players that we're hoping will come back here one day. That's going to be the messaging. It's been a similar message with different ownership groups. It's been a similar message with different managers, but it's going to be the same message that you're going to ultimately hear. And until it transforms itself into something that's viable, it's not going to be believable. And that's the reality of how it works. And, people are going to look the other way and think it's not going to work out. How many people don't think that, Derek Jeter coming and buying in and trying to lead and build, similar to what Kapler's doing, just in a different way. Is there a ball player, a former ball player, a Hall of Famer who garners more respect, universally around the game than Derek Jeter, with the way that he performed on the field and the way that he played the game and the way that he talks the game and the way that he believes and the way that he speaks and his convictions and his integrity and all the things that matter? To think that guy left the organization just a few years ago because things weren't right. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure there's something that couldn't be, that isn't more damning than that. You know what I mean? It's like, this is the man who presents himself in the buttoned up, dirtbag, play hard, succeed, win, expectation. I mean, and he was a Yankee on top of it for 20 years. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and that guy, basically said that we're at an impasse where we don't see things the same way. Yet everybody around baseball, universally, whether you're a fan, whether you're a former employee, as a former player, I mean, really, it doesn't matter who you're speaking to. We all agree what we see in Derek, because Derek's walked it every day of his life, in his career and his post career. His messaging hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. So when you see him leave, and then you see others who don't want to and who are leaving or who have already left, it's calling you out. It's not calling them out. It's not saying, okay, well, we just can't get people to buy into what we're selling. The reality is that what you're selling, people won't buy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's when you're trying to be, and clearly, and the only thing in defense of what they, clearly they're not going to have the financial resources to make the Juan Soto play, but they did have the financial resources to sign an Arise or a Soler or whatever. They could have played in and signed players for those similar type contracts, and if nothing else, may have brought more people into the stadium. But they choose to go this very analytical way, projectable models, toolsy players that may not have a great hit tool, but it may have a plus power tool. And the problem is now when you bring in, you're interviewing people from other places and they're walking away from your interview like this is a kind of a strange place, way they want to do their little experiment on how they feel they could reinvent the game. How are you going to find people to share that if you want to go to the Dodgers, first base coach or somebody else that's winning championships and want them to come into someplace as an experiment? You're going to have to promote it within what you got.
Right.
So
that's the
so
problem.
they're probably, they're going to have to do that. They're going to have to find a lot of yes people because it's going to clearly be a probability way of doing things. So anybody with a strong personality and headstrong may not buy into that way because that's going to be the way. It's just put themselves in a very narrow pool of finding people that share that vision.
Right.
Because let's face it, it's a loud. The analytics people, the supporters are loud. They're a small percentage, but they're loud. Well, guess what? You might have a product you think is great, but nobody's coming to see it, so you're not making the revenue. No one's watching you on TV, so you're not getting the TV revenue, and you've just created this very difficult, one-dimensional type of team. And you're this outlier team looking for a bunch of outliers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I always believed that the definition of a lot of, like when you were looking at a healthy organization, you knew when I would see whether it was coaches or players willing to make a lateral move, which is, I want to be there. I want to be there. It's not, like I'm not going from the first base coach to the bench coach job. It wasn't always a step up because you think that that's, ultimately what everybody's searching for, right? We're looking for advancement. We want to do more. We want more responsibility. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for, I want more money, in the baseball players, right? So, the idea is that I always believe, and I still do, and I think it's a very fair statement, is that, you're healthy when you have players and coaches who are willing to make lateral moves. You can go get a first base coach to be your first base coach because you're like, our situation's better than the one you're leaving. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what you're describing, and that's the position that the Marlins ultimately are in right now, is that they're not in a position to say, okay, we can get people to make lateral moves. We need people who are willing to step up. But when we're asking you to step into bigger roles, you're also asking them to, in some regards, or at least this is the perception, because it's a strong statement, but I want to be very fair. And again, like I said, we're not in these meetings, so we don't know exactly what's being said. We're not knowing how this is all playing out. We don't know what their expectations are, but I do think it's fair because you and I, we've been there. We've been in these situations. We've been all around them. And now we're on the outside, looking in and perceiving it the way other people perceive it. It looks like that to your point, you use the word yes men. Well, generally speaking, yes men aren't leaders. That's the point. See what I'm saying? Yes men aren't leaders. Yes men are yes men for a reason. They may be good at what they do, but they're good at being instructed and they're good at being told what to do and executing it, but they're not the leaders, right? So I mean, it's like we talk about this all the time. It's like the pool, right? As you get to the top of the pyramid where everybody wants to get to, you start to realize that there are common denominators, but like ability wise, everybody's got the same ability. So what differentiates you from the rest of from everybody else? What makes you what makes you a winner?
Yeah.
When everything else that's going on around you is lots of other winners, but your way of winning is working. And so, like, what's your secret sauce, and so that's where we go with that. And, you're just in a position right now where, to your point, you're having a hard time bringing in people that are organizational game changers. So, and that's what you feel like you need more than anything. You're like, we need this vision. We need this direction. It needs to start in the, in the minor leagues. And we need somebody to come in and just help us develop our players and develop the love and the integrity and I play for the Marlins and I'm proud to play for the Marlins. This is my organization. This is my team. This is where I want to be. And, getting into the idea of that, I firmly believe that's kind of what the Rays were for a while. I mean, when I was playing against the Rays were, a rudderless organization. They didn't know where they were going, but then they decided, okay, well, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to build from the grassroots up. People may not love it, but we're going to get to a spot where we can compete, and we can compete in the American League East. I mean, to this day, I still think it's one of the greatest things that I've ultimately seen in my 30 years around Major League Baseball was the Rays finding a way to compete in the American League East of all divisions. So they did. So there is a way to do it, but it has to start out and there has to be loyalty. There has to be loyalty. Who's been managing the Rays organization the whole time?
Kevin Cash. It was Madden and then Cash.
But you see my point, right? I mean, but see, that's you have a fabric now. You have the people leading your way and people buying into it. That's what the Marlins don't have yet. It's like they're still so far behind that, where to that point, it's like, okay, how do we build it? How do we grow it? Like, if you get traded to the Rays as a player and you've never played for the Rays before, but you've only watched them. I mean, if I got traded to the Rays today, I'm like, I would be going there with this idea of, I know they do things different. And I've got some learning to do about how the Rays do their business and how we compete and how we go about what we are and what we do, because they have a way. The Marlins don't have a way. They don't. No. Nothing describes them right now.
Well, and thing is, you talk about leadership, and one of the things I heard about, and again, I didn't hear from Skip. So, but thinking about, and it does kind of add up when you talk about a leader and somebody, what's a leadership characteristic that Skip probably was tired of being told what to do, and wasn't going to do it. And to your point, because we're going to have to wrap this up in a minute, about Kevin Cash and Eric Neander, the president of baseball ops. Interesting, when Bendix leaves to come here, I think the Rays signed both Cash and Neander to extensions of 3 more years or whatever. There's that manager front office connection, which really, when it was clear that Skip was getting the out, they basically cost themselves a year. They probably should have just cut ties in the offseason and allowed Bendix to come in, and which made 24 even more of a lost year, more of a set you back year, because now you lost the like you say, the qualities in the manager that you're looking to replace. You just lost, and you want now somebody to say, I'm Peter's guy. Yeah, I'll work hand in hand, and we're going to build this little formula, do it a little bit different, yet can't argue with the results, and people will buy in. So how they get out of it, Holly, I mean, at some point, they're either, going to have to swallow their pride, listen to people who know what's going on, get some baseball people in there, and restore some sort of credibility. Because with Derek, a lot of Marlins fans, get mad at Derek and this and that, and he did a lot wrong. Don't get me wrong. But Derek was the key to it all, to this ownership group. He was the reason why Nick Castellanos wanted to play here, why some players would have wanted to play here, was Derek Jeter.
Of course.
And when he left, it really set this thing back more than people realize. Closing thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, listen, the Marlins can recover, and they can get there, but it's going to take a lot of hard labor and a lot of love, going into the minor league system and teaching from the ground roots up, and establishing expectations and establishing branding and establishing this is who we are, this is how we play. It's like that message, and it has to be consistent. It has to be consistent. When you have an organization that's got, when I was with the Los Angeles Dodgers, when I got there, I was with Tommy, through my rest of my 6 years there, we were in a lot of transition, a lot of flux, a lot of coming and going, managers hired and fired and all this other stuff. It just it creates chaos, and the players feel that chaos. And when you have that, you're not going to win. It's just simply put, you're not going to win that way. What the Marlins have to do is to buy into what their product is, and they can't expect anybody else to buy into it. They're not going to, like, it's almost like, okay, I'm not going to worry about what the public says. We're going to go out there and just prove it to you. And it needs to be a lot less words and a lot more ground balls, if you know what I mean. Get out there, grind, push, improve, develop. Take a 30th round pick and turn them into something special that nobody saw coming, because you start having those moments because guys are on board and guys are fighting. Right now, in all fairness to the group, but I mean, it's kind of blanketed the Marlins since their existence, was that this is a transitional organization. Players come and go. Yep. The grass is greener somewhere else. You may come here on with the hope of reestablishing yourself, with the idea that you're not going to stay long and you're going to be leaving. And they have to get past that. The Rays figured out a way to do it. They knew that their greatest assets were developing players. We're taking the 30th round pick, turning him into something, and then probably trading him 3 or 4 years into his big league career because they couldn't afford him. And fans may not love that, but it also created a chain reaction. That when you got drafted by the Rays, you knew you had a chance. You knew you were going to get that opportunity. You knew that they were going to invest in you, not because you were a first-round pick, but because you were a Ray and we drafted you. And we're going to help you get to the big leagues. And when you get there, it may be establishing yourself, doing what you do with the understanding that I may not be here forever. But in the meantime, you're buying into everything Rays. And now you've got a healthy organization. You've got, the ability to win. It's going to win, somewhat consistently. Of course, they've been doing a fantastic job when you look at the broader picture. But the idea is that you've now got a way. And so when you become a Ray, you understand the way. When you become a Marlin, you don't know what you're getting right now. You don't know what you're signing up for.
You're trying to get away.
Well, it's just the way that it works, and it's the way that it goes. And you just don't know what you've got. Like, if I were a Marlin, if I were becoming a Marlin today, I would think that I would have to be incredibly highly motivated, self-motivated, with the idea that, all this other noise that goes on around me, I'm not going to be distracted by it because I'm on a mission, But not everybody can do that. Most players don't typically think that way with that level of intensity on a daily basis, with the idea, they want to be secure in who they are and, what uniform they put on every day. And they want to know that they're going to go out and they're going to compete, and they're going to compete with their teammates, and they're going to win, at least somewhat. And that's what you're searching for.
Yeah. And we'll end it on that, because until they make some looking in the mirror at what they've done and how they want to treat people, it's going to keep being this way. Because part of that way is treating people with dignity, being respectful to people, being transparent, and not doing 13-minute interviews when you let Skip go and use 8 and 9 minutes of that saying, those are private conversations, I'm not going to get into it. And so what they don't realize is that's not just talking to a group of media and an audience. The rest of the candidates that want to manage there don't see much direction, don't see much leadership, don't see much conviction, and certainly don't see any transparency. Because you could say something as simple, philosophically, we're different, we would have liked for it, but we needed to, the visions didn't match, no offense to anyone's vision, but what we're looking for was here. Those type of things convey more than that's a private conversation. We're not asking you to say what Skip said. We don't want a transcript of your conversation. We want you to be able, as the authority, to articulate why you're looking for a manager. And we got ended at that because the witching hour is coming up. And I hope that's the message the Marlins get out of it. Todd Hollandsworth, you're the best, buddy. Great show. And our audience, please like, subscribe, and keep tuning in. And we'll be back with Hitting with Holly here, and we'll catch everyone in the